Gameplay-wise, I would say Re-Pac is an improvement in almost every way. You have all the moves from before, but now you get like a Yoshi flutter. It doesn't give you the most distance, but just enough to be useful. I gotta be honest though, after playing the PlayStation version right before this, I kinda just forgot this move existed for my entire playthrough. It was just never in my mind. And oddly enough, I had the same experience with the D-pad. The game does obviously support better analog movement, but I just kinda got used to the D-pad, and I still kinda prefer it for this game. I think mostly that's because the levels are the same and just feel designed for it, and y'all conditioned me too much to like simplicity. But hey, you have that option now at least. Another control change is that the swimming controls have been overhauled. Previously to swim, you had to hold the triangle button to go down and the X button to go up, which was kind of disorienting. In Re-Pac, you sink naturally, and now it's kind of like Mario swimming or Flappy Bird. Maybe not Flappy Bird, but I think that comparison's funnier, so I'm using it. Oh, one new mechanic they added is now eating a power pellet turns you big. What is this, made out of spinach? I don't think it really adds anything to the game. It's basically just a visual effect, but it's something. I appreciate them adding it and trying to make the game fresh. To compensate for the areas with the gaps, the developers fill them in with temporary platforms, truly making you invincible. And I think sometimes there are like crates and stuff you can break now too. It doesn't add that much to the game, but it's cool and I do like it. It's little changes like this that I appreciate. Another one of the same scope is that they added enemies made out of steel, giving you more of a reason to get the chrome pellet and turns it into something a little more unique, making it less of a stolen concept from Mario 64. It's again something that doesn't add too much, but I think should at least be appreciated. They did try to make this game interesting in a few ways. One thing I would have really liked to see them add would have been some camera support. I'm not saying a full camera is obviously you can't have it being facing the player because you just see an empty void, but it could have been like Super Mario 3D World. In that game, you usually have 2 or 3 camera angles you could slightly adjust at any point. The only reason I bring this up is because I do unfortunately think the depth perception is still somewhat of an issue I ran into with this game. It's not as bad as the other versions, but it still does exist. Pacman's shadow doesn't always line up with the platforms, and I did find myself dying to this still quite a bit. And those damn sharks are still unavoidable. I dare you to try to sneak past them. I'm right at the invisible wall. What else does this game want? Roses and a sunset picnic with some wine? Well, no, you're not getting anything from me. I'll just take the hit, whatever. I don't really know how Namco could have avoided that. Like, it kind of just comes with the territory of remaking this type of game, as the geometry is pretty much reused, but it still is a little bit unfortunate. What I would say though is it definitely doesn't ruin the game or anything. It just feels a little antiquated when it does happen and pretty frustrating. Alright, we gotta talk about the graphics. Who in the name of Pacman said that this game of all games was allowed to look this good? Bandai Namco, okay? Those guys, they were flexing with this game, alright? It almost reminds me of Luigi's Mansion 3, a cartoony kids type of game with stupid amounts of detail. There are some textures that are still a little gross, like this radioactive waste does kind of still look like a PlayStation texture, but there's so much that looks outstanding that I can forgive the small moments like that. The whole game maintains vibrant graphics throughout, and Pac-Man honestly has just never looked better. Well done to the team who made this, because it is way too good for a goddamn Pac-Man game. Besides a few points, the game runs at a smooth 1080p 60 FPS on the last gen consoles and even 4K on the modern consoles. Is that the standard nowadays? I don't really keep up with modern games, I'm not gonna lie. Then you get to the Switch. Alright, it looks fine, but runs a little poorly. One thing to note is that there's a performance mode that lowers the resolution from 1080 to give it a smoother frame rate. I don't own the Switch version at this moment, but from everyone I've talked to, the performance surprisingly works really well with this mode, and every review I've seen of the Switch version highly recommends it, so I will too. I'll bandwagon. Usually I talk about the graphics and music together, and I'm gonna be predictable and follow suit. Unfortunately though, the team didn't redo all the songs in this game. In fact, I don't think they really redid any of them. There's a few new songs, like a song with lyrics that plays during the credits, and some boss fights have different phases, so there's some new songs there, but yeah, like 90% of the songs in this game are the same. I have a little bit of a music ear. I can tell there's some like slight mixing differences and compression differences. I don't really know though why they didn't just redo it. It's kind of disappointing, especially considering this remake did the graphic side of things so well. In Banana Mania, half the songs in that were completely new, and the other half were redone, but at least they tried to make new music. One of my favorite things about the game. I feel like in a remake, you should just have an all-new soundtrack, and you can always put the old songs as an option for those who want it. Or, you know, charge DLC for it if you're scummy like that. So yeah, it's a bit of a letdown to me, but on the plus side, the original soundtrack is still good, so it's not like they absolutely needed to change it for the game to be fun, but the crunchiness is still present. This does kind of create a paradox where you're playing a game with 2022 graphics that sounds like it was from the 90s. The sound effects were mostly reworked though, at least. No more elephant noises when you rev roll. I miss the elephant. As said, the levels are basically the same. The bosses though, well that's a completely different story, as some of them are almost entirely redone. We'll go one by one here. The windbag fight is mostly the same, but instead of just having 5 buttons to fling at him, you start with 3 and then ramp up to 5. Other than that, there's nothing too different here.
One of my biggest questions going into this remake would be, are they going to change the Anubis Rex fight? Are they going to change King Galaxian? Because that changes this game from like a 7 out of 10 to a literal 8 if they did.
And I was so happy to find out they did. Anubis Rex is actually really fun now. I love this version of this boss. It's not stupidly easy, there's still a lot that can come flying at you, and there are moments that will have you ripping out your hair, but regardless, it's a rewarding boss when you finally accomplish it. For one, there's really no jumping between Reveral platforms anymore, as it's a straight up floor, but also this floor will crumble, giving a much smoother progression of difficulty. One thing to note though is that while the original will give you a checkpoint in each phase, this game opts to make you start from the very beginning if you die. Since this boss is no longer criminally unfair, I think that's a fair trade-off. And yeah, what went from one of my least favorite parts in Pac-Man World turns into one of my favorite parts here. Well done, Namco.
Alright, it was time for King Galaxian. My heart was pounding as I entered the stage. I was like, am I gonna have to sacrifice one of my hands again? And to my surprise, they changed it. You can just hold down the button now. Oh, thank you.
Yup, King Galaxian lets you fire straight up now. Throw your turbo controllers in the trash, they're useless. It's a lot easier, I won't lie, almost too easy, but I would rather it be too easy than frying off my hand again. I only have one left after World 1, so I need to preserve it for as long as I can. Besides that, it's pretty much the same fight. There is a lot more health thrown at you too. I think if they wanted to make this hard, maybe just let players do the turbo, but give almost no health. I almost feel like they went a bit too soft on us here. Clown Pre is no longer an over-the-head eraser. Instead, being first person. It does lag a little bit on the PS4 version, the one I played, but I still think it's really fun and a highlight of the game. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of made me want more levels of these. I think this could have been expanded a bit. It's stupid fun, sure, nowhere near something like Mario Kart, but it's enjoyable and gave me a smile. This level's pretty easy, but besides that horrible turn in the original, so was the originals. I don't think every level needs to be hard anyways. Sometimes it's good to just sit back and have a, what's it called? I'm trying to think of the word. Oh yeah, fun. Chrome Keeper is basically entirely redone. Instead of the horseshoe-shaped room now, there's a bunch of conveyor belts. You have to get the Chrome pellet and Reveral into him, avoiding the magnetizing devices overhead, which I often kept forgetting to dodge. This whole fight is pretty slow, to be honest. I don't think it's better or worse than the original. I do appreciate them going out of their way to literally recreate a boss. In a way, it's kind of like just playing a new level entirely, which for a remake, I do quite appreciate.
And I do have to say, the bosses, which were a huge low point for me in World 1, are one of my favorite parts about this entire game now.
I don't mean to keep talking about Banana Mania, it's just like the closest point of comparison, but I have to say, while I obviously love that game, Re-Pac kind of kicks its ass a bit. Like, this is how you do a remake. It's not perfect, sure, no game is, but there's a lot of care and passion put into this product, and I really felt that from the second the game booted up to the very end. You could tell the developers really did care about the product they were making. One concept I'm kind of mixed on though is the new life system. It's basically the same, as in you can game over and have to start a level over, but now there are a ton more lives. Look at this, I had like 70 at the end of my playthrough, and I didn't even do the roulettes here because at a certain point I had so many damn lives I was like, well, I don't need to waste my time here anymore. In that sense, the pressure when it comes to the lives are almost entirely gone. I don't think it ruins the game, it just makes it a bit easier, and I could have just been biased playing the original before this. I do think someone who hasn't would struggle a bit more. I played the game in a voice chat with Ninja Star Compass, who did not play the original, and towards the end of the game, he only had like 10 lives or something, and he was fully collecting. It could have just been me being a little more experienced. Yeah, I'm just a pro at Pac-Man World, what can I say? Okay, one last time I mentioned Banana Mania. At least Pac-Man World Re-Pac has a life system. Okay, I'm done. The cops are coming to my house to take me away. I can't talk to my wife and kids anymore. But while now the roulette system and mechanics like the bonus levels became a bit more useless to me, one benefit to having such a big amount of lives was that I could actually play the mazes again without much stress about what effects it could have on me. And actually, the lives are no longer even shared between the two periods. You have 3 fresh lives upon starting a maze that does not impact the rest of the game. This is one of the best changes in the entire game in my opinion. It makes it feel like a genuine break and breath of fresh air in the gameplay and provides a lot more of an adequate variety. One idea they implemented to counter the easier difficulty is that you can no longer take a hit by a ghost. There's no health bar. Instead, one touch and you're dead, which is in line like the classic arcade games. What isn't like the classics though is now the power pellet makes you big. Levels do accommodate this, and it's funny to see the terrain get stretched out. Although keep in mind, this basically does nothing. It's a visual. Also, if you hug a wall normally, you get a slight rumble and see sparks. I found this fun to do on purpose. It's funny. The hub world has also pretty much been entirely recreated here. Unfortunately, there's still nothing to do and not much to see, which is kind of sad. I felt like the emptiness was very prevalent in a modern game. To exemplify the fact that you can do worlds out of order now, at least, there are branching paths instead of a straight up left to right, which was seen in the original, which I think is a hint to the player that they do have the freedom to explore. Someone in the original might not have even realized that you can skip levels. They also added teleporters, which helps you move between worlds, which is a nice addition. What's super nice about these is you can literally mash the button once you enter one, and it will automatically be on the next world. They were really looking out for the players here in a lot of ways. That is such a nice quality of life feature. Alright, but I know half of you came to this video to hear the juicy details, the flaws. Let's get rid of the butterflies and flowers and happiness, and let's turn hardcore. Well, here's a flaw. In the original Pacman world, all you have to do to see how many fruits you have at a given point is press a trigger button down. It moves up slowly, no problems. But despite this game not using trigger buttons, you can't do that here. You have to pause the game, which is very quick, but I don't know why they changed it when it was literally perfect before. The fruits still come up when you're by a door, so whatever, I guess. And one positive about the items, like keys and letters at least, is now before you enter a level, you're told exactly what it has in it. So no more crying if you forgot where one of your friends were, like in the original. Another thing that I think sucks, and a lot of games do this nowadays, this isn't exclusive to Pacman World, is that this game always flashes easy mode in your face if you die too many times. I'm not really against games having an easy mode, but I really don't like when games ask you if you want to switch to it. Like, let it be an option, put it in the menus, but don't have it be a recommendations. I don't want this in my damn face. I wish you could at least turn off the prompt, but you can't. And yeah, besides those small things and the music, I think that's all I got. So let's go face off against Talkman one last time. Third time's a charm, so maybe he'll win. Nah, just kidding, he sucks. Here no longer are you required to save all your friends. No, in fact, you can let them all perish if you want to. But the trade-off is you won't have any health in the final boss. Huh, this sounds familiar. It's almost like I suggested this in my original games review. That's crazy. I was trying to do some cute foreshadowing in my review. I don't know if it paid off. But regardless, it's a great change and a really good way to encourage explorations without it being forced. You can fight Talkman with nothing if you're good enough at the game.
I certainly wasn't.
It's still a hard boss, but the plus side is there's no longer any move that sends you flying off the stage. It's a classic type of boss in these games where you learn the patterns and sit there playing over and over until you can do it. It is quite rewarding, and you're sitting there playing in the dead of night with sweat dripping down your face. The first phase lets you do whatever attack you want, so you're no longer required to throw pack dots. You can rev roll too. The second is a barrage of cannonballs that come down on you with an iron pellet as well. I wonder if I should grab that. It might be important. Then and only then can you jump on him. This phase is kind of like the Chrome Keeper fight, and not just because of the Chrome Pellet, more so because there's a lot of waiting. The third phase, Talkman turns him super big. You have to destroy his boots and then climb up his hands to jump on him. Be careful though, because this hand can actually come down and kill you. Who's gonna dodge that? If you do rescue all your friends, not only will you have a constant influx of health, but you get a new happy ending. Now Pacman doesn't kill Orson in cold blood, he invites him to the party back on Pac Island and everyone's happy. Don't worry, the bad ending still has you murder Orson because fuck that guy, right? There's a game in the credits, and one thing that I think kind of sucks here that I'll mention just while we're here, apparently Namco didn't shout out anyone who worked on the original game, which is kind of lame. It was quite a long credit sequence, so I thought at first they had to but apparently they didn't. I don't think it's a good look for Namco to do that, but I don't want to get into that all right now. It's not the point of this review, but it's a little disappointing regardless if true.
Pacman World Re-Pac is just so good. It's a great game. My biggest problem I have with it, I wish there was more to play.
I think that's not a bad problem to have necessarily, but seriously, I do wish it lasted a bit longer. I felt like the original game was a good length, but it was also harder and had worse mechanics. Now that the gameplay is entirely refined, I wanted more worlds this time around, or some more side modes, or anything. No. There's still the maze mode in OG Pac-Man, but nothing truly new. I doubt they'll do it, but they could always add DLC to the game, but yeah, I don't think that'll happen. They can also make a new Pacman World game, but I think they might actually just make Pacman World Re-Pac 2 or Pacman World 2 Re-Pac. I don't know. I made a poll. and I probably agree with that one. I think Pacman World Re-Pac should be used in a game design class to show how a remake should be. The only major downside is just the lack of new music. Like, maybe skip that chapter in that textbook, but besides that, it's a remake that's not only faithful, but does enough new where it's not entirely stale, like the redone bosses and moments like the chrome enemies. They also changed a lot of the fatal flaws from the original game. Overall, this is a product that's really welcoming for both beginners and veterans of this franchise. It's a job well done, and even if it has a few flaws still, it's genuinely one of my favorite games that released this year. And honestly, I may go so far as to say it's been my favorite remake in at least a good few years.